The clang of metal on concrete sliced through the humid air of the auto shop. A gritty symphony of chaos in downtown Atlanta. Sparks flew as a rusted wrench slipped from LaToya's calloused hand, slicing a gash across her palm. Blood dripped onto the oil-stained floor, pooling in a dark crimson stain that blended with the grime. She bit her lip, stifling a cry, her eyes darting toward the manager's office. A glass box perched like a vulture overlooking the workshop. "You good, LaToya?" A voice called out, rough but curious. It was Mike, the new guy, his faded baseball cap tilted back, revealing a scruffy beard. He'd started that morning, introduced by the manager as just another pair of hands for the heavy lifting. "I'm fine," LaToya snapped, her voice tight as she wrapped a filthy rag around her bleeding hand. "Ain't like they're handing out Band-Aids around here." She forced a grim smile, but her eyes betrayed the pain. Not just from the cut, but from the weight of a job that demanded everything and gave nothing back. Ethan Carter watched from the shadows, his gut twisting. At 38, he was the CEO of Carter's Auto Empire, a chain of 10 garages across the Southeast. 3 days ago, he'd walked into this shop, his shop, disguised as Mike, a rookie assistant with no skills to his name. Nobody here knew the guy lugging crates was the man signing their paychecks. Ethan had taken over the business from his late father 4 years earlier, turning a struggling family operation into a multi-million-dollar machine. But standing here, watching LaToya wince as she gripped a busted torque wrench, he felt like he'd inherited more than just a company. He'd inherited a mess. "Hey, that cut looks bad," Ethan said, stepping closer, his voice low to keep it between them. "You should get it checked out. Might need stitches." LaToya let out a bitter laugh, shaking her head. "Yeah, right. And lose my paycheck? I got 3 kids and a landlord breathing down my neck. Help me hoist this transmission, Mike, before Greg loses it." Ethan hesitated, his eyes scanning the workshop. The tools were a disaster. A drill with exposed wires, a jack leaking hydraulic fluid, gloves so worn they were more holes than fabric. "Why do you work with this junk?" he asked, playing dumb. "Welcome to reality," LaToya said, her voice sharp but tired. "Greg says new gears, not in the budget." Meanwhile, he's rolling up in a shiny new Lexus. She nodded toward the glass office where Greg Thompson, the regional manager, sat barking into his phone. A heavy-set man in his late 40s, Greg's tailored suit strained against his frame, his Rolex glinting under the fluorescent lights. As if on cue, Greg stormed out, his face red. "LaToya, that Ford Mustang was due at noon," he bellowed, his eyes sliding right past her bloody hand. "And you, newbie," he jabbed a finger at Ethan, "get those tires stacked in the back, or you're out by Friday." Ethan's jaw tightened. He saw the way LaToya flinched at Greg's voice, her shoulders bracing like she was expecting a hit. He noticed something else, too. Greg's tone softened when he spoke to the other mechanics, all white guys who nodded and smirked. But with LaToya, it was always a shout, always a threat. Ethan's blood boiled, but he kept his face neutral, hauling tires to the dimly lit storage room. There, buried under a pile of greasy rags on a rusty shelf, he found it, a dog-eared folder labeled Incident Reports. His heart sank as he flipped it open. Page after page of accidents. Cuts, burns, a fractured wrist, all blamed on worker error. LaToya's name appeared over and over, alongside others he didn't recognize. Tucked inside was something worse, an email from Greg to corporate, boasting about cost-saving measures by delaying tool upgrades and skipping maintenance. At the bottom, a digital signature from the finance team, his finance team, greenlighting the whole thing. Ethan's hands shook. The profit reports he'd bragged about at board meetings, the ones that earned him bonuses, were built on this. On LaToya's blood. On broken tools and broken trust. He glanced back at the workshop, where LaToya was wrestling with a misfit socket wrench, her bandaged hand trembling. "You just gonna stare?" she muttered, not looking up. "Why do you stay?" Ethan asked, his voice softer than he meant. "This place, these conditions, why?" LaToya's eyes met his, hard as steel. "Because 5 other shops said they didn't need someone like me. Because 2 asked if I was there to mop floors. Because here, at least, they know I can fix a car better than most of those guys out there. Ethan nodded, but inside, something shifted. His father, a first-generation mechanic who'd faced his own share of prejudice, had built this company on fairness. Now, it was a place where people like Latoya fought to survive. As he watched her limp back to work, a plan sparked in his mind, one that would turn this garage upside down. But what Ethan didn't know yet was just how deep the rot went, and what it would cost to fix it. The Atlanta sun beat down on the cracked asphalt outside Carter's auto empire. But inside the garage, the air was thick with tension and the stench of motor oil. Latoya knelt beside a beat-up Chevy, her bandaged hand trembling as she wrestled with a rusted bolt. The socket wrench she gripped was held together with duct tape, its jagged edges threatening to slip again. Ethan Carter, still disguised as Mike the rookie assistant, watched her struggle, his chest tight with a mix of guilt and rage. Just yesterday, he'd uncovered a folder of accident reports, dozens of injuries, from cuts to chemical burns, all swept under the rug. Worse, he'd found an email from Greg Thompson, the regional manager, bragging about slashing maintenance budgets to optimize costs. And the kicker? Ethan's own finance team had signed off on it. "Need a hand?" Ethan asked, crouching beside Latoya. He kept his tone casual, but his eyes scanned the workshop, taking in the chaos. A flickering overhead light, a hydraulic jack propped up with a cinder block, a drill with a frayed cord sparking ominously. This wasn't just a garage. It was a death trap. Latoya shot him a sidelong glance, her expression guarded. "Unless you've got a magic wand to fix this junk, I'm good." She tightened the bolt with a grunt, wincing as the rag around her hand darkened with fresh blood. "Greg's got us working with scraps, but he's too busy polishing his Lexus to care." Ethan's jaw clenched. Greg Thompson, the man running this shop into the ground, sat in his glass office, his feet propped on the desk, scrolling through his phone. At 48, he carried himself like he owned the place, his designer tie a stark contrast to the grimy coveralls of the mechanics. Ethan had noticed something else, too. Greg's voice dripped with contempt when he spoke to Latoya, but he slapped the backs of the other mechanics, all white guys, like they were old buddies. The disparity wasn't just unfair. It was deliberate. "Why don't you report this?" Ethan asked, nodding at the busted tools. "OSHA, Labor Board. Somebody?" Latoya snorted, wiping sweat from her brow. "Report it? I've been down that road. Sent emails, filled out forms. Greg says I'm overreacting. Last time I pushed, he cut my hours. Said I was lucky to have a job." Her voice hardened. "You don't get it, Mike. Places like this, they don't see people like me as worth listening to." Ethan's stomach churned. He'd built his career on turning his father's small garage into a regional powerhouse. But what had he missed? Latoya wasn't just fighting broken tools. She was fighting a system that dismissed her at every turn. He thought of his dad, a Jamaican immigrant who'd faced the same kind of prejudice, yet still believed in treating every worker with respect. This shop was a betrayal of that legacy. That afternoon, Ethan slipped into the storage room, pretending to organize parts. He pulled out his phone and texted Sarah Nguyen, his legal director. "Found proof of negligence and budget fraud. Need you and an auditor at the shop by 3 p.m. Keep it quiet." Sarah, whose parents had been mentored by Ethan's father, was fiercely loyal to the company's original values. Her reply was instant. "On it. Bringing Rachel Cohen, our best forensic auditor." While Ethan waited, he kept an eye on Latoya. She was troubleshooting a faulty alternator with a multimeter so old it barely worked. Her skill was undeniable. She pinpointed the issue in seconds, rewiring the system with a precision that put the other mechanics to shame. "Where'd you pick that up?" Ethan asked, genuinely impressed. "My dad ran a shop in Savannah," Latoya said, her voice softening. "Taught me everything before the big chains ran him out of business." "Guess which one?" She didn't wait for an answer. "Carter's Auto. Your boss's company swallowed us whole." Ethan's heart sank. He'd spearheaded the acquisition of smaller shops 5 years ago, a move his board had called strategic. He'd never considered the human cost. families like Latoya's, crushed under the weight of his ambition. The guilt hit like a punch, but he pushed it down. This wasn't the time to wallow. It was time to act. At 3 p.m., a sleek black SUV pulled into the lot. Sarah and Rachel stepped out, their faces all business. Ethan met them at a diner across the street, away from Greg's prying eyes. "It's worse than I thought," Ethan said, sliding the incident reports and email across the table. "Greg's been embezzling maintenance funds, forged signatures, fake reports, and the finance team approved it." Rachel's eyes narrowed as she scanned the documents. "This isn't just negligence. It's systemic fraud. Accident rates are 10 times higher than reported. And the forged approvals? They trace back to someone high up in corporate." Sarah leaned in, her voice low. "We also found something else. A recording of Greg telling another manager he hired Latoya to check a diversity box. Said he'd fire her the second she complained about safety." Ethan's fists clenched. "We've got enough to bury him," he said, his voice steady but burning with resolve. "But I need to know how far this goes." He glanced out the diner window, where Latoya was still working, her bandaged hand a stark reminder of the stakes. Greg thought he was untouchable, but he was about to learn just how wrong he was. And what Ethan uncovered next would shake his company to its core. The Atlanta garage buzzed with the usual chaos. Wrenches clanging, engines roaring, and the sharp tang of gasoline hanging heavy in the air. Latoya hunched over a sleek Mercedes-Benz, her bandaged hand fumbling with a cracked socket wrench as she fought to meet a deadline. Ethan Carter, still cloaked in his disguise as Mike the Rookie, watched her from across the shop, his pulse pounding. He'd spent the last 24 hours with Sarah Gwynn, his legal director, and Rachel Cohen, the forensic auditor, piecing together a damning case against Greg Thompson. The regional manager's embezzlement, forged safety reports, and blatant discrimination against Latoya were all laid bare in emails, recordings, and spreadsheets. Ethan's company, his father's legacy, had been complicit in this mess, and today he was going to end it. "Latoya, that Benz better be ready for the client in 10. Greg's voice boomed from his glass office, his face flushed as he strutted onto the shop floor. At 48, he carried the arrogance of a man who thought he was untouchable, his gold cufflinks glinting under the fluorescent lights. He barely glanced at Latoya's blood-soaked rag, his eyes fixed on a well-dressed man beside him, the city's deputy mayor, here to pick up his car. "Mike!" Greg snapped, spotting Ethan. "Quit slacking and sweep the floor." Ethan gripped the broom, his knuckles whitening. He'd seen enough: Greg's cruelty, the unsafe tools, the way Latoya braced herself every time he spoke. But he held his tongue, waiting for the perfect moment. That moment came sooner than he expected. As Latoya adjusted the car on a hydraulic jack, a low groan echoed from the equipment. The jack, its frame rusted and leaking fluid, shuddered under the weight of the Mercedes. Ethan's heart lurched. He'd read the reports. A similar jack had crushed a mechanic's hand last year, blamed on carelessness. "Latoya, step back," Ethan said, his voice low but urgent. She frowned but complied, just as the jack let out a piercing screech. The deputy mayor, chatting with Greg about Carter's auto excellence, turned pale as the car tilted. Latoya dove out of the way, and with a deafening crash, the jack collapsed, sending the Mercedes crashing to the floor. Shocked gasps filled the shop. Dust swirled in the air, and for a moment, no one moved. "What the hell was that?" Greg roared, storming toward Latoya. His face was beet red, his finger jabbing at her. "You trying to ruin me? You're done. Fired. Effective immediately." Latoya stood her ground, her voice steady despite the chaos. "I've been warning you about that jack for months. I've got emails, forms, every single request ignored. This isn't on me." Her words cut through the noise, and the deputy mayor raised an eyebrow, suddenly attentive. Greg laughed, a hollow, desperate sound. "Excuses. This is sabotage, human error, just like always." He turned to the mayor, forcing a smile. "Don't worry, sir. We'll cover the damage. Carter's auto prioritizes quality." Ethan's blood boiled. He'd had enough. Stepping forward, he pulled off his faded baseball cap, letting it fall to the floor. "No, Greg, we don't," he said, his voice calm but razor-sharp. "Not under your watch." The shop fell silent, every eye on him. Greg's smirk faltered. "Who do you think you are?" "Ethan Carter," he said, his gaze locked on Greg. "CEO of Carter's Auto Empire." A collective gasp rippled through the garage. LaToya's jaw dropped, her eyes darting between the man she'd known as Mike and the CEO now standing tall. The deputy mayor's mouth hung open, sensing a storm about to break. Greg stammered, his face paling. This is a joke, right?" But Ethan wasn't laughing. He nodded to Sarah and Rachel, who'd just entered the shop, their tablets glowing with evidence. Sarah held hers up, a video playing loud enough for everyone to hear. Greg's voice, smug and clear, saying, "I hired her to check a diversity box. First safety complaint, she's gone. Carter never shows up anyway." The deputy mayor's expression darkened. "Is that you, Thompson?" he asked, his tone icy. Rachel stepped forward, her voice clipped. "That's not all. We've got forged signatures, embezzled funds, and accident reports buried to hide a tenfold increase in injuries. All approved by someone in corporate." Greg's eyes widened, his bravado crumbling. "You can't prove anything," he sputtered, but his voice shook. Ethan turned to the crowd, mechanics, customers, even the deputy mayor. "We've got everything," he said, holding up a folder. "Emails, recordings, financials. This shop's been running on lies, and it stops now." LaToya stared at Ethan, her expression a mix of shock and wary hope. The other mechanics shifted uncomfortably, some nodding in silent agreement. Greg lunged forward, desperate. "You're blaming me for your budget cuts, Carter. You're impossible targets." Ethan's gaze didn't waver. "You're right. I share the blame. I trusted the wrong people, prioritized profits over safety. But you," he stepped closer, his voice low and lethal. "You chose to steal, to discriminate, to put lives at risk." He nodded to security who'd just arrived. "Take him out." As Greg was escorted away, still shouting about lawsuits, Ethan turned to the shop. "This garage is closed until every tool, every system is safe. Full pay for everyone during the overhaul." He looked at LaToya. "And when we reopen, we'll need people who know cars and value people. If you're in." LaToya's eyes narrowed, her trust hard-earned. "Why should I believe you?" she asked, her voice steady. Ethan nodded, respecting her doubt. "You shouldn't. Not yet. But you'll see." The deputy mayor chimed in. "I'll ensure an independent inspector oversees the changes." Ethan's plan was in motion, but what he didn't know was that the fight was far from over, and the real battle was about to begin in the boardroom. The Atlanta skyline glittered under a blanket of stars, but inside the newly renovated Carter's Auto Empire garage, the air hummed with anticipation. Chrome tools sparkled on pristine racks, and the faint hum of a state-of-the-art ventilation system replaced the old stench of oil. Ethan Carter, 38 and CEO, stood near a ribbon-draped entrance, his suit crisp but his eyes heavy with the weight of the past week. The garage, once a death trap where LaToya bled from broken tools, was now a model of safety and respect. But Ethan's battle wasn't over. The boardroom showdown loomed, with shareholders itching to oust him for his costly reforms. Tonight, though, was about something bigger, a legacy reborn. LaToya stepped forward, her work boots echoing on the polished concrete floor. Gone was the blood-soaked rag. Her hand, now healed, gripped a pair of ceremonial scissors. As the new director of safety and compliance, she'd spent days ensuring every wrench, jack, and drill met the highest standards. Her eyes scanned the crowd, mechanics, city officials, even the deputy mayor who'd witnessed Greg Thompson's downfall. "This isn't just a garage," LaToya said, her voice steady and commanding. "It's proof that people matter more than profits." She cut the red ribbon, and applause erupted, cameras flashing as the shop officially reopened. Ethan watched, a quiet pride swelling in his chest. His father, a Jamaican immigrant who'd built this company from a single wrench, would have nodded in approval. But Latoya's words echoed his own guilt. He'd let men like Greg, now a disgraced nobody, scraping by after his lawsuits crumbled, exploit workers like her. Greg's Lexus was gone, his name blacklisted. Last Ethan heard, he was sweeping floors at a gas station. A bitter irony for a man who'd valued flash over fairness. The celebration spilled into the parking lot, where food trucks and a local jazz band turned the reopening into a community event. Latoya's teenage sons, Jamal and Marcus, beamed as they handed out flyers for a new scholarship program Ethan had launched. Named after Latoya's father, a mechanic driven out by corporate greed, the Carter Tech Training Center would fund young mechanics from marginalized communities. "My mom's a hero," Jamal told a reporter, his voice cracking. "She fixed cars with nothing, and now she's fixing the system." Inside, Ethan unveiled a plaque in the break room, etched with Latoya's father's name. "He taught you to survive," Ethan said, handing her the first scholarship certificate. "Now you're teaching others to thrive." Latoya's eyes glistened, but she held her composure. "This means more than you know," she said. "But don't think I'm done pushing you." Ethan chuckled. "I'm counting on it." The victory felt sweet, but Ethan's phone buzzed with a reminder of the storm ahead. A text from Sarah Gwynn. "Board meeting tomorrow. Harper's allies are rallying shareholders. Be ready." Daniel Harper, the ousted VP, had left a trail of loyalists who saw Ethan's reforms as a financial disaster. The $2 million spent on renovations across the chain had sparked a revolt, with headlines screaming about Carter's reckless spending. Ethan knew the truth. The pilot garage's 15% profit spike proved safety was good business. But convincing the board would take more than numbers, it would take a story. That story came alive the next day in the corporate headquarters' sleek auditorium. Shareholders whispered as Ethan took the stage, Latoya at his side. An unusual sight for a board meeting. "You're here to judge my leadership," Ethan began, his voice calm but unyielding. "But first, hear this." He clicked a projector, and Latoya's scar-filled forearm filled the screen. "This is what your profits cost," he said. "A woman who saved cars, and lives, with tools that could have killed her." Latoya stepped forward, her presence silencing the room. "I worked through pain because I had no choice," she said. "But Ethan Carter gave me one. He's not perfect, he let this happen, but he's fixing it. Are you?" She held up a report. 0 accidents since the overhaul, customer satisfaction at 98%. The shareholders shifted, some nodding, others stunned. Ethan seized the moment. "My father built this company on integrity. I lost sight of that, but I'm bringing it back." He flashed a final slide, a graph showing rising profits across renovated shops. "Dignity isn't a cost. It's a profit driver." The vote was tense, but Ethan prevailed. The reforms would roll out chain-wide, and the dissenting shareholders, led by Harper's cronies, were sidelined. Months later, Ethan stood in the training center, watching Jamal tighten a bolt with a brand-new torque wrench, its digital display reading 60 foot-pounds. Latoya, now a respected executive, oversaw a network of safe, thriving garages. The company's stock had rebounded, and Ethan's father's portrait hung proudly in every shop. But the real legacy wasn't in the numbers, it was in the lives changed, the trust rebuilt. As Ethan locked the training center's doors, he thought of Latoya's words, "We survive with the bare minimum. Imagine what we can do with the right tools." He'd given her those tools, but she'd given him something greater, a chance to honor his father's dream. And as he walked away, one question lingered. How many more Latoyas were out there, waiting for someone to see their worth?